Hello again, this is Trenton, and I was working on the top 100 challenge on leechess.org. In order to get that, my classical rating needs to reach about 2300. Last time I tried, I got to around 2264, and I was in 116th place. So I was gonna take another shot at it, see if I can reach the top 100. So I did my first game. I decided to do a post-game analysis rather than showing the whole thing because the time controls in this, it's 15 plus 15 for each side. So the games can go on for a pretty long time, and a lot of times I'm just waiting for my opponent to move, so there's like a lot of empty space in between all of it. So instead I just want to go through the game and give you just the key points to take away from it. And as I do the top 100 challenge, I'm going to be analyzing each of my games after the fact, and then just see how I grow along the way. So I played with white and I opened with d4, d5, c4, dc4. This is the Queen's Gambit accepted, and here I had a couple of options for white. I was considering something like knight f3. This is a more positional line, and, well, I was trying to think of the kind of middle game position I wanted, because in this knight f3 line, there's a lot of lines where eventually black is going to prepare e6, c5, get rid of this pawn. I'm going to end up with an isolated pawn at some point. And then sometimes black provokes a4 with a6 in certain variations, and then the b4 square becomes weak. So I was thinking about the kind of middle game position I wanted, and I decided that I like e4 more. This is the more aggressive option. I'm trying to take back this pawn immediately, and I'm just playing, well, I'm just trying to take over the center immediately. So I thought this was a much more aggressive option when I was thinking about what kind of middle game position I wanted. So this explains a little bit of my early on hesitation. This is important because early hesitation in the game can lead to time trouble later on, and that happened in this game. So my opponent played b5. I was skeptical of this move because black has a much stronger option with e5. And then the main line continues something like knight f3, takes, b4, a4. Okay, and then white's going to shatter these queenside pawns, and then I'm just going to attack it in the future with maybe bringing a rook to the C line in the future, bring out the bishop, bring the rook here. Eventually, white's going to regain the pawn, and I'm going to have a slightly better position. So the main line is more like that. Black played b5. This is called a certain variation. It's called the Greco variation. So I thought this move was weaker because I can play a4, c6, a takes, c takes. This is a typical undermining strategy in the Queen's Gambit. I played b3, and this is not the main line. I thought it seemed like a natural move because after, say, c takes b3, I'm just going to play bishop takes b5. That comes with check, and then I follow up with queen b3, and white just has a pretty nice position already. So b3 looked natural, but a much better move was knight c3. It's because in these variations, the c7 square is weak in a lot of lines. So I was afraid that black might play b4 in some variations, but this is nothing to be afraid of. At the very least, I can play queen a4 check and pick up a pawn, and white's already winning, because I'm just going to win this pawn next, and then I'm just up a pawn. So that's nothing to be afraid of, but an even better move is something like knight b5 or knight d5. The point being that white's going to head straight for the c7 square. This is even more powerful, and white is already winning. So if black plays a6, this is nothing to be afraid of. I'm just going to play knight b5, a b5, and I'm going to take the rook on the open a file. I put the rook back. And the computer says this is fine for black, but I'd definitely take white because after something like this, white remains up in exchange. In the future, I can maybe target these pawns somehow. Maybe black is technically okay because this bishop's pretty active. It's cutting off the b1 square for my rook. And then the computer says black should be equal, but I think I would take white here for sure because this extra material is, well, it gives me the most winning chances, although black has some activity in the short term. So aside from b4 or a6, black also has queen b6. White will simply respond knight d5, queen b7, bishop f4, and again this square is just very weak. White gets a pretty overwhelming position pretty fast. So a possible line is something like this. And then f3. This is to protect the g2 pawn and prepare to develop this bishop. So now the queen is no longer attacking g2. I'm about to play bishop e2, maybe king f2 and castles, king f2 and rook e1. So a few combination, a lot of different moves I can go here. For example, he goes check, king f2, then I'm going to go bishop e2, rook e1, swap some pieces, I'm up material. So in this variation, knight c3 is much stronger than b3 because the c7 square is weak in a lot of lines. In the game I played b3. e5 is a powerful move, and black is just going to get this pawn instead. I went for bc4, he took the pawn. Here I played an inaccuracy. I was considering the move c takes b5, and the computer says this is a very powerful move because you're cutting off this knight, and you're preparing to bring out your pieces like knight f3, bishop d3, or c4. So, and also this pawn is kind of weak because I can easily attack it with a move like knight f3 and try to win it. So c takes b5 is a more logical move, and I could easily get a winning position out of this with swift development. Instead I played knight f3, and my idea was that I was going to gambit a pawn for a winning position due to an overwhelming lead in development. So my idea was after b takes c4, I was going to play bishop takes c4, bishop b4 check, bishop b2, trades. And here white has an overwhelming lead in development because all of black's pieces are still on this back row. I have possibilities like queen b3, bishop takes f7 check. I also have bishop b5 check. This pawn is also weak, so in the future I can go something like what, knight b3 to here. I just have a lot of attacking ideas, and if I need to I can quickly castle or bring my rook to these lines. And then you can see like white just has all the lead in development, black's pieces are all in the back row. So this was my idea of gambiting a pawn because I saw that I could get a huge lead in development and I could easily get a winning position. So the computer agrees that this is winning for white, so I was correct in that assessment. The problem with knight f3 according to the computer is that it allows b4, and the point is that now black has connected pass pawns. So he's going to play a5, he's going to reinforce with knight c6. And then black just has simple development, say bishop c5, maybe knight here and castles. Black's development isn't too hard from here, and these pass pawns are going to start restricting this knight for a very long time. So I'm going to have to try to prepare this somehow. So this is going to be kind of awkward. So this is the flaw with knight f3. In the game, my opponent played bishop b4 check, which is not bad for white. So we both overlook that b4 idea. So bishop d2, logical move, bishop c5. I was kind of suspicious of this move because he just helped me develop my bishop, and he's not really attacking me with bishop c5, so I'm not really threatened by it. So I just take this pawn, and now we transpose to a previous variation, where I could have played c takes b5 immediately, and white just has a better position. So bishop e7. Yeah. In this position, I was thinking about the move queen c2, and the reason I rejected it is because after queen e7, I have to play bishop d3 anyway. So I figured that bishop d3 was the more flexible move, so I decided to start with that instead. But according to Stockfish, black has an even stronger option with knight d7. He defends this bishop for a moment, and then he's just going to prepare rook c8, then he's going to remove this bishop. He's going to attack my queen. So the queen on c2 is misplaced according to Stockfish, so this move was even worse than I thought during the game. In the other game, I thought bishop d3 was just more flexible, but actually queen c2 is weak for concrete reasons. It's on the c file, the rook's going to come here, and this queen is going to be on a bad spot. In the game, I did play bishop d3 by different reasoning. So, knight e7. Knight f6, I can play e5 and kick it sometimes, so he plays knight e7 to safer square, so I don't think that's too bad. I castled, and he played knight g6. So on the previous move, I could have played, instead of castles, I could have played bishop a5. This move is just going to attack his queen, and it gives me, according to Stockfish, a winning endgame, because after bishop b6, trade, 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 and then bishop c2, this pawn is incredibly weak, and white is going to win it very easily. So then this ultimately ends up with an endgame where white is up a pawn. So likely a winning endgame for white. I'm going to play maybe king e2, knight c3, or knight bd2, bring out the last rook. White is probably going to win this. So instead I castled, which is okay, but not as aggressive. He played knight g6, and I played bishop a5 now. When I played bishop a5, I hesitated for a moment. You can see on the clock that I took about 2 minutes to play this move. This is a pretty critical decision that fixes white's advantage with precise play. I hesitated with bishop a5 because I noticed that I was giving up this f4 square for the knight. The bishop no longer controls that. So that is a weakness that I created by playing bishop a5, so I have to be careful of my opponent's counter chances. So, bearing that in mind, I ultimately went with bishop a5. He played bishop b6, I traded, queen b6. And here, I played knight a3. Knight a3, my idea was to gambit a pawn. I wanted to play knight c4. Ultimately in the game I hesitated and I didn't play that, but I should have. So, it says I took about 1.5 minutes on that move, was it? Yeah, so I took a while on that move. Knight bd2 is basically the same idea, but knight f4 and he can attack the bishop, it's unprotected. An alternative idea was simply bishop c4. And black simply has no way to protect this pawn, so it's just going to fall. And if he tries to win this, his king is still stuck in the middle. So I can have something like, let's turn on the engine for a second. If he tries to win this pawn, yeah, I was going to play rook e1. And then what is he going to do? If f5, I can just attack it. So yeah, black can't win that pawn. So had I just played bishop c4, it would have been much simpler because knight d7, and he has no way to just defend that pawn. So that pawn is just dropping off. And then white just has a winning endgame again. This is a much simpler variation than knight a3, which is also winning, but more complicated. So castles. Yeah, in the game I played queen a4. I thought it looked promising because I'm attacking this pawn with these two pieces, but it allows knight f4, which I saw in other variations, and here it leaves the bishop on d3 unprotected. So once I left that bishop on d3 unprotected, I should have been more alert to this knight f4 idea. I took some time on that, I took a decent chunk of time on that too. So knight c4 was my original idea, and in fact it was winning. So I couldn't calculate everything on this, so I wasn't so sure. But queen b5, the point is that I needed to play knight takes d4 here, and now the queen is hit, and then white just gets an overwhelming initiative here because if black plays something like queen g5, I have rook a5 to attack the queen, I have knight d6 to attack the bishop, I have knight f5, in some variations maybe I can go knight e7 check, so knight f5 is a strong square. So white's initiative gets pretty overwhelming had I just taken that pawn in this variation. But when I was calculating, I didn't notice that, and instead I was looking at moves like knight d6. And here, it's slightly better for white, but it's much less clear, and that's why I ultimately rejected this line in favor of queen a4. because now it's more complicated. Like queen d7 takes, and then it's just not as overwhelming as an initiative as it was. I'm better, but it's not clear. So queen a4 is a pretty big mistake. Knight f4, that's the move I was looking out for earlier, and here it comes. Rook fd1, I protect the bishop. And knight e6, I was absolutely stunned by that move. I wasn't expecting that move at all. I was definitely expecting queen g6. And after I saw him play knight f4, while he was thinking on his clock, I was thinking, well, if he plays queen g6, what if I play bishop f1? Because that's the move I'm expecting he's going to play. And then as I calculated, I noticed he was going to play knight h3 check, king h1, and then, yeah, this is a fork to king and rook, so black is just winning here. So nothing like bishop f1 is just impossible for white. So I would have to play knight e1. And this way I'm preparing to meet knight h3 check with king f1. And then here white should be holding, but it's hard to hold. So bishop e4, how does white hold the draw from here? White is technically equal, but it's just hard. So king h1, knight e2, I trade the queens, knight e takes e2, a6, I regain that pawn, rook d4, and white equalizes. So that would be tough to figure out during the game, but knight e1 was the move I needed to come up with, and I needed to find all of this follow-up to it. So allowing knight f4 with queen a4 was a big mistake. I should have just played my original plan, knight c4, take over the initiative. But instead we went down this route, and he suddenly played knight e6, and I was stunned. Because that allows knight c4, and after queen d8, knight a5, attacking the bishop. And after bishop c8, I played rook ac1. So this is a pretty logical looking move. I'm trying to play maybe knight c6 or rook c7 in some variation, and white has a very active position here. It says white is winning, but the computer wanted to play a brilliant move here, queen b4. Why do I think this was brilliant? It's because it looks so subtle, like you just shift this queen over one square and I don't see what I'm really doing, so it's a very subtle move. And the point is, black is almost in a mid-game zugzwang. That's very rare until an endgame. It's not until an endgame where all moves are bad for black and like a losing endgame. But here black simply has no good moves, because if knight d7, then I take this pawn and white is winning. And I'm going to follow up knight c6, and this is just bad for black, so we can't do that. If he plays queen b6, then I have knight c4, queen c7, b6, queen b7, knight d6, knight c6, queen b5. And then here, black's position is falling apart because now he can't take it, or I take his queen. So queen b6 doesn't work. That's probably what he would have to try, but I would easily be pushing through with stuff like b6. So that doesn't work. If he goes rook e8, then I have e5, and this was a move I needed to see, because it looks like I'm not attacking anything immediately, but I'm preparing an unstoppable threat of bishop e4 and then just winning the rook in the corner, and there's nothing black can do about it, because this knight controls the b7 square, so he can't oppose his bishop. And black can't play a6 after queen b4, because then I answer b6. And on the next move, I'm going to play b7, and white just wins a piece. So black is losing. So if I noticed that I could prepare this bishop e4 threat with a move like e5, then I would be more interested in playing that. The problem is that black wants to play a6. And this is how I could have found queen b4. It's just a very tough move to find because it looks so quiet. But it's a prophylaxis against a6, because now black is preparing to remove his rook with something like rook a7. He's also he wants to take here, and then he wants to oppose his rook against my queen on the a file. So queen b4 is a prophylaxis against this a6 move. So queen b4, with the idea to follow up with e5 and bishop e4, and a6 was now met with b6. In the game, I played a more natural looking move, so I didn't find that brilliant move. I just played rook ac1, followed up with knight c6. White is still winning, but it's not as clear. Well, not as brilliant anyway. And then I just took the pawn. Yeah, white is simply winning here. I'm up a pawn now. Knight b6. I played queen a3. This is a less accurate move. The computer says either queen a1 or queen b4. In both cases, I'm defending this knight, so both moves are equally powerful. So for example, queen b4, takes, takes. And here, white centralizes his queen and black has no clear way of kicking it immediately. So I'm just attacking in every direction. I can reinforce maybe the queen along this file with the rook in the future. Maybe I can transfer this bishop somewhere like, I don't know, like to b3 and attack f7. So white centralizes the queen, and I see a lot of grandmaster games like this where they slowly centralize the queen and then they attack in all directions. Happens in a lot of grandmaster games, so it'd be interesting to see if I could pull that off in the future. So opportunities to centralize a queen where it can't be kicked is a pretty beautiful looking move, like a queen acting like a true queen and attacking in all directions. So I'd love to pull something off like that in my game. So seeing it at least in some variations, it shows that I have some potential as a player. So I'd love to keep up this growth and see what I can come up with. This is a sign of my potential. So let's see. So knight d4. Now I'm moving in reverse instead. So it's a step in the wrong direction, but I'm still winning. Bishop d7, knight c6. So you see, like, white just lost some time there. King h8. And white was winning, and you can see that I have 1 minute left on the clock, and here's where I start making some mistakes. I needed to play something like e5. I didn't want to play it because I opened up the d5 square for the knight, but this isn't really an issue because this will be black's only active piece, so it's hardly even a threat. So let's say knight d5, bishop e4, knight f4, queen e3, and then f4. So yeah, giving that knight that open square, it's basically nothing because white just takes over the center anyway, and that knight's still not doing anything. So I didn't have to worry too much about giving up that square to the knight because he only has one active piece, so it's hardly even a threat. Let's see. Okay, and if he took, then takes, c7, and here. Okay, and here it's something like g6. This isn't the most accurate, but I can easily get a winning endgame out of this because if trades, I can easily reinforce this pawn on c7 and easily get black to give up a piece. So that c7 pawn is too powerful, and this is a simply winning endgame even though the material is equal except a bishop versus knight. So rook c5 is a step in the wrong direction, and this is where white starts to fall apart. So a5, rook e5, wrong way, queen c5. Yeah, white's falling apart because I overlook a fork with knight d7. Queen d6. The computer wanted to play rook e6, and here white has a way to draw still. So knight c5, trades, bishop c4, attack f7. He wins that pawn, and now I push b6. Okay, the fortress here is pretty amazing. So first rook a1, I create a flight square, I attack this knight. Ultimately, he takes the bishop, I play knight c4. The fortress is kind of like this. He gets the rook behind the pawn. The key move is rook d7. I cut off the king along this 7th rank, so now the king can never get active and help these two rooks hunt down this pawn because it's defended by a minor piece. I can just play h4, rook b4. He's attacking my rook, and now rook c7. This is the key fortress. So the rook defends the knight defends the pawn defends the rook. So black can't break this setup. He would have to prepare a flight square, and at best all he can do is give up a rook for the pawn and knight, and then I have a rook versus rook endgame, and it's equal material, so it's a dead draw. So this is an interesting fortress right here. The rook cuts off the king, so we can never threaten the rook, even if you got the king all the way over here. Nothing happens. And even then, I can easily take some pawns if I wanted to. I just have to watch out for this hanging knight. But this is the basic setup to secure a fortress in this kind of game. So that's starting with rook e6. So I played queen d6. a4. Here, objectively, I am losing, so I figured, like, well, should I resign or do I have any fighting chances? And I decided I did have a fighting chance still, even though I'm losing. So I played queen h5. My idea was I want to provoke some weaknesses around the black king. If I can play e5, I threaten mate on h7, and maybe using these weaknesses I can try to provoke some mistakes. So he played g6 to kick my queen. I answered queen e5 check. That opens him up along this diagonal. f6, weakening his king a little more. Yeah, queen a1 was unnecessary here. Queen c3 is more active. You never want to use your queen to blockade a pawn. So queen c3, I'd rather use the rook to block the pawn, not the queen. So queen c3 would have been much better. I played queen a1 in the game. Bishop e3, rook e1. King g8 is another stunning move, and it makes no sense to me. It gives white a chance to draw, but I still didn't see it in the game. In the game, I tried e5. The move was queen c3, queen e6, h4. And here, white again has a fighting chance. I can play h5 in some variations, weaken the king a little bit more, and then I can prepare to bring my queen over there with something like queen g3. Maybe I can try to lift the rook and attack the king. So white still has a fighting chance if I play like this, and I can hold a draw according to the computer. In the game it was e5, queen d7, and then from here it's basically lost. So takes. White basically has nothing beyond this point. It just falls apart. Yeah. Trying to set up some threats with something like h5 and maybe queen f6 and taking this bishop, but white simply isn't there in time. There is no counterplay. So here I resigned. There's nothing else white can really do. During the game, I was kind of nervous because my opponent had a question mark next to his rating, and it was 2492. In classical ratings, there often are a lot of cheaters, so I was concerned during the game, and it was just kind of suspicious. So I did check his profile after the game, and it looks like he really was playing in good faith. He wasn't a cheater. He has a good blitz rating as well. He's been on here for about a year. It's really the new players that you got to be more concerned about. Like if they're have an account that's 1 day old or something, or like even an hour old, and they already have a rating of 2500 and what. Yeah, it starts getting very suspicious. But he was playing in good faith. His profile has been on there for a while, so he really is a strong player. And this is good news for me as well, because in order for me to reach the top 100 on Lichess, I need to reach a rating of about 2300. And if this opponent is now rated 2500 after that last game, and I performed this well against that kind of opponent, then I think I definitely have the potential to get pretty high up in this for sure. It's just going to take a while because I just have to fight my way up to get to 2300. But I could certainly get there, and this game has shown that I do have a lot of potential for getting there. I performed well against someone rated about 2500. All I have to get is 2300, so I could probably get even higher than that. So I'm pretty happy with this game. I lost this first round, but I think I can certainly make it to the top 100 if I continue this series. On a last note, I prefer to give you the post-game analysis rather than showing you the full game, because otherwise it simply takes too long, because it's just the game is about an hour long. So this way I cut the time analyzing the game. I cut it down a lot, so the videos are much shorter. And I'm going to continue, see what I can do in future games. This is episode 1, my first loss, but I think I definitely can get there anyway. So Farewell for now, and I hope you found this video pretty educational, so good day.